This week in the Regency, it's fashions for February. We've gone this week to the Chester Courant of the 9th of February, 1819. So towards the end of the Regency. And again, we have a local paper taking ideas from magazines. In this case, two magazines. The first one is not acknowledged about where it's from, but in fact, it is from La Belle Assemblée. It's a walking dress, literally a dress one uses to walk. A high dress composed of French grey Circassian cloth. The bottom of the skirt is ornamented with bands of white lutestring edged with corn, the colour of the dress, which forms lozenges. Each lozenge is ornamented at the top and bottom with a white lutestring rose, the heart of which is very much seen. It is formed of hard twisted silk, and this gives the flower a rich and novel appearance. The body is made up to the throat, but without a collar. It is ornamented round the top of the bust with a light silk trimming. Both the back and front are full, but the Athenian braces, which are worn with it, confine it to the shape. The dress has a plain long sleeve, a long plume of white ostrich feathers, the edges of which are curled, is placed on one side. French grey gloves, a large Indian scarf is thrown over the shoulders. This dress is worn in carriage costume as well as for elegant promenades. And we can see the lozenges are those kind of diamond shapes down the bottom. But what on earth are Athenian braces? Well, I don't think that anybody knows really. I've done a bit of research on this. Probably there's an obscure book somewhere that has it, which I don't own. So I went back to the originals. I thought, well, why are they called Athenian? And I went back to look at some Greek vases. I should say here that my husband is an archaeologist, and so this this sort of thing occurs to me naturally. And I found two images that I think are useful in figuring out what an Athenian brace is. The first is this statue of Athena. And you can see that she has a kind of big collar, almost like a torque, which comes around her neck and holds down the dress underneath, the chiton underneath. When I looked at the image of the walking dress up close, we can see that there is a kind of big collar ornamented, which they say it's ornamented around the top of the bust with a light silk trimming, but it doesn't look that light because it's got those knobs on it, little flowers or I don't know what they are, to tell you the truth. So I thought, okay, maybe that's it. But does that really hold it close to the body? And then I looked at a lot of images. And on this Athenian vase, I found what I think they're talking about is this crisscross over the breast to hold and tied underneath that collar on the back of the blue dress. And I think that the Athenian braces are in fact a dual collar plus tie that keeps the dress tight to the body at the top. So that was fun finding that out. So there are three dresses in this particular article. The next one is an evening dress, and the one after that is a ball dress. And I had to look quite closely to figure out what the difference was. So evening dress, a round dress composed of white satin. The skirt falls in easy folds around the figure. The bottom of it is richly trimmed with a double ruche of white net. over which is a beautiful wreath of white net roses intermixed with large velvet leaves. This is surmounted by a net ruche to correspond with the bottom. The body is cut low around the bust, but so as to shade the bosom in a very decorous manner. It is trimmed with lace tabs. The bottom of the waist is trimmed to correspond. A very short lace sleeve made full. The body is contrived in a very novel way, so as to form a part of the sleeve. The headdress is a low white satin toque, ornamented in front with white roses, which are surmounted by a plume of ostrich feathers. It's worth noting here that ostrich feathers were exceedingly expensive, that they were required for drawing rooms when you were presented to the Queen, but they were also on the badge of the Prince of Wales. He had 3 ostrich feathers on his coat of arms, and so they were very fashionable during the Regency. It is tied under the chin by a row of pearls, finished by pearl tassels. And here we actually have someone saying, oh, and this is from Ackermann's Repository of Arts. So it's a beautiful dress. Obviously, it must have taken an enormous amount of time for the modiste assistants to make. It's quite expensive. But what makes it different to a ball dress? Well, let's have a look at a ball dress for February 1819. Ball dress, frock of scarlet gauze, brocaded with white silken flowers, worn over a white satin slip. The dress richly ornamented with fine lace. The headdress consisting of either a beautiful tiara of pearls or a fancy ornament of downy plumage or a frosted Italian frivolité. This ornament is, however, almost concealed by a bonnet de Turc, composed entirely of, again, white ostrich feathers. The stamina of the Turk's cap with the pistil are represented by a small plume of short white heron's feathers. Now, where it says stamina, I think this is referring to stamen. The Turk's cap is supposed to look like a flower. And we have the stamen and the pistil. For those of you who don't know the difference, as I didn't, here is a diagram to show you. And we look at the Turk's cap and we can see kind of a resemblance, but you know. So what's the difference? What's the difference between this frock of scarlet gauze and the evening dress? And I think there are 2 main things. The first is the length. I think the scarlet gauze is shorter and therefore will be easier to dance in. The second is how heavy the material is, how hot and sweaty you're going to get in it, basically, because Regency dancers, which I'll be talking about quite soon, they're quite energetic. You know, there's a lot of jumping around and moving, and there's a lot of movement, quite up and down movement, as well as side to side as we think of dancing. And people got quite hot and sweaty over it. Of course, a lady never got sweaty. A lady merely glowed. But there are quite a few contemporary accounts of men mopping their brows with their handkerchiefs, and because their neck cloths are right up to here, and so they get very hot indeed. So I think the main thing there is the lightness. It's gauze over a satin slip. It's quite light fabric, and it's cut low so that you get some air. So I think that the main difference is in the weight, like how easy is it to dance in, like how high the hem goes so you can see the top of the slippers, the fact that it's a very light fabric, it's gauze, it's satin slip, and it's not too heavily weighed down with ornamentation. I mean, the evening dress has large velvet leaves, which is going to make it much heavier and less able to move around. And possibly also the set of the sleeve. If you've got the sleeve and the bodice being one, which is the description in the paper, I would think that moving one's arm around would be more difficult, whereas just sitting like a lady at a dinner table and eating would be easier. I'm fascinated by, at this point in fashion, we're getting very much the Orientalism starting to creep in with the Circassian cloth, and you see in other images of the time headdresses in the Circassian manner, and en Turc, the cap en Turc, and also, of course, the Athenian braces. And we're seeing here the beginnings of a very large movement towards Orientalism in the middle of the 1800s, moving away from the chinoiserie of the 1700s. So that's the fashions for February in this second week of February, 1819. If you'd like to know what happens next week in the Regency, subscribe. And this is Elizabeth Layden. I'll see you next week in the Regency.